Now, nothing says spring more than filling a pot with beautiful spring flowers and watching it unfold. And the great thing about it is that you can do that instantly, really. You can pot up a beautiful container with instant spring colour to make a real impact and a focal point in the garden. And I've done a little raid on the local garden centre and come up with a whole range of different things that take my fancy. And the thing about spring is that you can plant these instant pots with perennial plants that you can then take out of the pot once you've had the display from them, and then plant them out in the garden so that they'll flower out in the garden next spring. So it's like having a nursery container full of plants that you can plant out when you want to replace them with your summer display. So really good technique to use. So I've part filled my container with compost, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer up a whole range of these lovely plants and see what I think works best. So the first thing to choose is a shrub, really, to act as the focal point in the pot, so that will give some height as well, because in a deep pot like this it would look a bit silly if everything was all hummocky and low. So I'm going to try and choose a shrubby plant that's got some height. Something like a camellia, a small potted camellia would be really good. I've got loads of flower buds on this one, and that would look good in this pot. And again, you could transplant that out into the garden after it's done its thing in the pot. Or you could use something like a cherry. This one's probably a little bit big, really, to go in the pot, but it still nonetheless gives a light, airy nature to the display. But the one I've got my eye on, really, is this Pieris. This Pieris is an absolute stunner. It's called Pieris Passion. It's got these beautiful pinky red flowers. It's in the heather family, and it's an acid loving plant, but it will do in this container for the spring months. So what I'm going to do is knock that out of the pot, and I'm going to make a hole in the back of the container so that I can position this plant towards the back, and then I'm going to rotate it to find out which is the best face so that it's facing forward. So I'm just going to pack that compost underneath that plant and in the sides and just secure it in position, pulling some more compost up in to fill those gaps, and then we're ready for our next plant. So I think I'm going to use this a wallflower, this Erysimum here. This is a perennial wallflower, and once you've finished with the display you can actually cut this plant back and then plant it out in the garden. So I'm just going to try it round this side first, and I think it's a bit too tall over here, so I'm going to bring it round on this side of the Pieris where I think there's enough space for it to sit comfortably. So let's knock that one out of its pot. They root through into the bottom of the pot quite happily, so you just got to ease them out quite gently. Again, make a hole for this to go in, and leave it so it's sort of slightly leaning over the side of the pot. Make it look naturalistic so it looks like it's hanging out, and that's how it's grown in the pot. And we're ready for our next plant. So I'm going to try this hellebore over this side, I think, because I think that will look good. And it's got a nice drooping habit, so knock that one out. Hellebores are notorious for sticking to the inside of the pot, so make sure that you water that one thoroughly, and just bring that one in round here and use it to fill that side of the pot really well. And again, packing in with the compost underneath, and we've got our basic structure and our shape to this container. Now, what I've done earlier is I've pre-prepared some tulips that I had. I bought these tulips in a pot, and I've started to split them apart so that it makes it easier to pop them in individually, rather than trying to pop the whole lot into here all in one go, which would look a bit peculiar. I've broken down the bulbs individually, and that means that I can actually tuck them in between the roots of the other plants. I can tuck those bulbs in here and there so that they'll carry on growing up through the display and create a real lovely zing of colour in the display over the next few weeks. So it's really like having a vase of flowers really indoors. I'm just using these as little highlight colours in the container like that. And then I want something to hang over the front of the container, so I'm going to use these beautiful Carex Carex Coman's Bronze, this one's called, and I'm going to put one side, and you can see how that also helps to hide the base of the other plants. And then I'm going to put this other Carex on the other side, so I've got a nice balanced effect. And then I've got some more space for some more tulips to go in. Good job I split these down before we started. And I can pop another tulip in there, so that we've got a really nice focal point at the front of the display as these tulips carry on growing. And then what would be a really good finishing point is this black grass, Ophiopogon, which I can pop in the front of the pot so that it just hangs over the front of the container. That'll just sit in the front of the container, and then I can just shift and jiggle those plants, fill in with a bit more compost around their root balls, wiggle them around a bit so that it sits nice and comfortably, and there's my finished container that I can put in a really eye-catching position in the garden that we can enjoy for the rest of the spring.